talking about this tension between, producing content and at the same time consuming content, and thinking that there might be too much running content out there at the moment, and it can feel overwhelming. It can feel you like I definitely feel some pressure to stay updated with everything, and you probably feel a little bit the same, even if, of course, it might be in a different way. And I haven't entirely figured out how to be in the space as a producer and also as a consumer of this content, but it's something interesting to reflect on and share opinions on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know that you or I or anyone will ever arrive to a point where they've completely figured that out. I think that's just life in general, but multiple things can be true. I mean, I think there is way too much running content for any person to consume all of it. It's just it's overwhelming. I mean, it's so easy to put out a podcast, put out a newsletter, post something on social media, and because for better or worse, we are attached to our screens, we're just constantly being fed this. It's in our inbox, it's in our feeds, it's being sent to us through our group chats, all these different things. So I've learned from myself a key to that is just managing the input. And so some of that I do have very direct control over: the newsletters that I subscribe to, the people that I follow on social media, how often I'm visiting those platforms. And that's something I've certainly gotten better at over the years, but it's evolved as the platforms have evolved. I mean, as I was saying to you before we hit record, I've been in this space for a very long time. I mean, over 20 years at this point, and I've seen how it's evolved. And even 10 years ago, we didn't have Substack. It just didn't exist. I had just started my newsletter and those were a thing, but they're not what they are now. I mean, there were a handful of running newsletters in general, never mind, trail or marathons or track focused, whatever, but there weren't nearly as many. So that was much easier to like literally figuratively digest at the time. I mean, people weren't live streaming their races or vlogging on YouTube with the consistency that folks are doing now. Video wasn't as big of a thing on Instagram, as it is now. It wasn't as easy to produce this content. So, I mean, a lot of that's changed just over the last 10 years. I'm sure it'll change in directions that you and I can't even foresee over the next 10. But I do think a big key is just kind of managing your input and paying attention to the things that you want to pay attention to and not feeling like you have to try to keep up with everything. I do think there is a lot of FOMO built into this throughout the running space, where people do feel like they're falling behind, or they actually are missing out if they're not subscribed to this person's newsletter, they're not following a certain person on social media, or they're not watching, all the YouTube videos. And I mean, a lot of that's in our own heads, but I think we're conditioned to, to feel that way. But a much more sane way to operate is to just really limit your inputs and really pay attention to the things that you want to pay attention to. And every so often someone may send you something that you wouldn't have caught, or maybe you saw it somewhere else, and like you check that out, and then you kind of move on with your day. But I do think it is an evolving relationship for sure.
And I think also trying to escape from the algorithms that is constantly feeding us with content, either social media, YouTube, Instagram. You're not actually choosing what you want to see and what you want to read or watch. The algorithm is doing that for you. So being in control of that is probably a good thing.
Yeah, it is. And I feel like I can speak to this with some authority, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back about that, but that's what I do in my newsletter every week. I mean, I am personally finding all of these different things that are interesting to me and kind of curating it in a roundup every week, essentially, that goes out in my newsletter. And I do that all of myself. And some of these things do end up, in a feed, but more often than not, they're things that I've gone searching for. And there's some sense of autonomy in that. Like, I actually have control over it rather than it's just constantly being fed to me. And yeah, I guess if you're subscribed to my newsletter, like, I'm feeding it to you, but I look at it more as like, I'm passing this on. This isn't, there's no algorithm here. Like, I am the algorithm. Like, I'm the person who is curating that. And for me, because a lot of my roots are in the early blogging days. I mean, it feels very familiar to that for me. I mean, I was writing a running blog in the early 2000s, well before newsletters were a popular thing, and you had to go find things on your own, and people linked to your stuff and you linked back to other people, and it created like some conversation. And I do feel like there's a little bit of a resurgence of that in the newsletter space, particularly on Substack, because the infrastructure is there for it. But it feels less algorithmy than, looking for something on Instagram, or even if you're looking at your YouTube homepage or that sort of thing.
For sure. Yeah. There's probably some kind of algorithm in Substack as well, but it's not as present, or like, I don't know. You still have control over what you're signed up to and what you want to see on your feed, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Are you
with
enjoying that
Substack,
space?
parts of it, I would say. I was just going to say with Substack Notes, which is essentially their Twitter clone, I had spent some time on that when I first moved the morning shakeout over to Substack, and every so often I'll pop in there, but I just have really become a bit averse to feeds kind of in
Yeah.
general, so I tend to avoid it. But I mean you can see what newsletters I'm signed up to on Substack, and I'm signed up to others that are not on Substack, but I've done that all on my own accord, or someone has like recommended, hey, sign up for Francesco's newsletter, or whatever it may be. And that is something like I have control over and hasn't necessarily been fed to me. And the thing that I love about the newsletter space is that you can subscribe to things, but you can also unsubscribe to them if you're no longer interested in the content, or it's not doing it for you anymore. It's like simple one click and you won't ever get that newsletter again, which is great. And so, I mean, I am enjoying just the space in general, but I don't do much on Notes because that is a very algorithmically controlled thing, and no one knows how it works. And I think, because I've done this before, you will drive yourself crazy if you're trying to figure out how the algorithm works and how you can quote unquote hit it big,
Yeah.
on those types of platforms. So I've generally just tried to avoid that. I mean, I hardly ever use Instagram anymore. I still have the accounts because I think it would be detrimental not to have them from a discovery standpoint, but I've generally tried to and have successfully avoided the algorithms largely over the last year or so.
Good job. It's not
Not
easy.
easy.
Yeah.
No.
So what's exciting for you right now in the running space as far as content? What are you signed up to? Like, what are some of the publications or accounts or people that you follow and that, according to you, produce good content, good
Oh,
writing?
that's a great question. Well, good writing has become harder and harder to come by. I feel like there's a lot of media, but the amount of good writing is less and less. There's a lot of great video and
Or good podcasts?
podcasts and content in that way. But I'm actually, I wouldn't say completely starved, but like I'm hungry for more and better long form writing kind of around running. There's a guy who doesn't have a huge following. He's not specifically in the trail and ultra world, though. He's done a couple of those events, named Sam Robinson, who I've linked to a bunch of times in my newsletter.
Yeah.
He lives here in the Bay Area where I'm from, and he and I are of a similar age and background, and he is a philosophy major and historian, and he writes a lot of essays that are running adjacent, but have a lot of, sort of background or philosophy kind of included therein. And everything he writes like really makes me think like quite a bit. So I love reading his stuff. Along those same lines, Sabrina Little has a column that she writes
Yeah.
for I Run Far and has for a
Love that.
while. And I've loved Sabrina's work for a long time. I've had her on my podcast. And again, her stuff always makes me just sort of like think, which I really enjoy doing. I like writing that makes me think. Writing for me is an exercise in thinking. So I really enjoy her stuff when it comes out. Thinking about other forms of media, I am a big fan of Dylan Bowman and Aaron Lutzi's Second Nature podcast, which is more about the running slash outdoor industry. And I just like being a fly on the wall for some of those conversations, just because I've been in this industry for a long time, but I'm not as directly involved as I once was. So it helps me to kind of keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on sort of in that world. And I do like watching videos on YouTube that are really well done. So in the marathon space, I think Clayton Young is setting a new standard for
Yeah.
how you can bring someone along on your journey. I think he's chronicled his last 3 or 4 marathon buildups in great detail, and he has someone who's doing that for him. So he just has to do his job, as an athlete, and someone else will put the story together. But I find that kind of content really compelling, especially when you're seeing him getting his shoes on and trying to get his head straight before a big workout, or having a conversation with his coach after the race, and just sort of, again, being a fly on the wall for a lot of those types of moments. I mean, I find that really interesting, but also very instructive, because I spend most of my working time as a coach. So I love seeing how other athletes interact with their coaches, how other coaches will handle a certain situation. And I think he's doing as good or better of a job of that than anyone that I can think of. I love reading your stuff on Substack and Instagram. I mean, you've had a few posts recently. I'm not just saying this because you're having me on now, but you've had a few posts recently that have made me really think about things that are happening in the sport, such as doping and trail running. And recently, even on Instagram, I did catch in my feed that you had a post the other day about, as a professional athlete, which you are, like, what is your job? Is it mostly performance, or is it creating content? And how do those two things coexist with one another? And again, like, all of these things just make me think, and that's really what I'm in search of. And if you've been reading my newsletter for any amount of time, most of the content that I share is kind of in that same vein. It's stuff that's going to make you sit down and think for a second about your own situation, and how it may or may not be similar or different, what you could change for yourself, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like I'm in a similar position. Like, after like 25 years in the sport, it's hard to find something compelling and that is actually exciting for me to watch or read, because like my whole life is completely immersed in running.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, like, the level of excitement is not the same as before, and it's been like normalized, and a lot of situations are just normal, and
Yeah.
it's some like stuff that new runners may find exciting is maybe not exciting for me. So I feel like the selection of content that I read or watch is pretty big. Like, I have to make a conscious and tough selection of the content I consume. And I'm glad that the Morning Shakeout newsletter is among them, because as you mentioned, I love the fact that it's usually a list of thoughts, impressions on running, pointing to another
Yeah.
piece or another person, a podcast or whatever. So it's a great starting point to discover those stories and to reflect on so many different dynamics that I also go through with my own running, my own journey in running.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, and that's intentional as well. I mean, as it is, I put enough stuff in there that most weeks the newsletter is somewhere around 2,000 words, which is a commitment to be able to read it. I don't want it to take all day, but I mean, 2,000 words, even if you're skimming it, it takes a few minutes. But I have written it in such a way that I want to give you a general idea of what it is that's going on, or at least the thought that it may have sparked for me. And then there's almost always a link, and that's so that if you want to go dive deeper, you can do that,
Exactly.
for yourself. It's almost an invitation to do that. But one thing you just said that jumped out to me, and something I've been thinking about quite a bit myself recently, is I've been involved in this sport as an athlete for 27 years now. And I have to remind myself what it was like when I was first getting into the sport and getting excited about it. And this is back in the late 1990s, right? 1998 is when I started running cross country, and a lot of
Same.
things have changed since then. in terms of content and how we access it and how, how we consume it. Social media didn't exist, YouTube didn't exist, the internet existed, but it was, not as, it wasn't in our pockets like it is now. And it took a bit of a commitment. But I remember when I was getting into the sport, I was just so excited because it was all new, right? And I would go to the library and I would check out every book that I could find on running. I would watch whatever videos were out, and they were actual videos. They weren't things that you would find on the internet. You had to put it into, put either like a VHS tape or a CD like into a player and sit in front of your TV and watch it for an hour. But I found that stuff like deeply inspiring, and
Everything was inspiring and exciting. Everything.
Yeah, and it was all new, and it was, in some ways, like people were introducing it to you, but it wasn't constantly being fed to you like it is now. So it wasn't this fire hose of stuff. So when you came across something like I loved, and I still love running magazines, but I loved like Running Times, and it would come out monthly, but you would have to wait a month for the next one to come out before you could consume it. But then I would have a whole nother month to like spend with it and think about things. And now everything's just so instant. I don't think many folks spend that time like in deep reflection. Strava didn't exist. GPS watches weren't around back then. You wrote everything in a paper training log. I mean, I still do. I still have my paper training log that I write in. And that's something I got away from for a while. And I realized I got away from it because it was more convenient to just, upload something to Strava, and it happened instantaneously. But I thought about like, what am I missing? Well, I'm missing that quiet time where I can actually sit there and reflect on the run and put my thoughts down on paper just for myself. Like no one's ever going to see my actual training log. And I think there's a lot of, value in that. So now I'm at a point where I'm 43 years old, and I'm like trying to figure out, okay, well, how can I, not lose that excitement that I started with, but also not completely push away the benefits that technology has given us in terms of, the depth and breadth of, certainly content that we have, some of it inspirational, a lot of it informational, which is great. And so, yeah, it's just it's always evolving. But I think back to when I was young and that excitement, and that's harder now because I do think even though the platforms have changed and the speed at which we consume it has definitely changed. I mean, a lot of what makes running attractive has not.
Exactly.
How people get into the sport, why they do it, how they train. I mean, yeah, some things have certainly changed a little bit, but there
it's
haven't
still
been any
hard.
it's still hard. Yeah,
Like
it's
running
still
is
hard,
still
and
hard
it's
at its core.
and
That's what
but
makes it
even if you
exciting
yeah,
and
and if you take the numbers away from it, the times that people were running on a certain course 20 years ago versus what they're running now, how they train specifically 20 years ago versus how they're trained. There's way more similarities than there are differences in that. And so I think some of that novelty has kind of worn off for me. So I get less excited by the types of things that I'm like, oh, I've seen this movie 1,000 times, even if it's a different movie. But if it's really, really well done, or someone can do it in a unique way, like I'm just excited as I was when I was a 16-year-old kid, like getting into this for the first time. So,
yeah. Or for me, like competition is always exciting because every time it's a new story and new athletes and new characters, and as an athlete, it's beautiful to see it all come together, whether it's a championship or a marathon or another race, and the stories behind great performances are beautiful and always inspiring for me. So I have a lot of respect for what athletes are doing. And yes, of course, like every year there is the New York City Marathon, but every year is a new story and new athletes, and it's still exciting to watch.
yeah. Yeah, and these are stories again that are old as time. It's just there's just new characters, every so many years, and that's something I'm trying to embrace. Is like, a lot of the athletes that I kind of came up with and whose careers I followed because they were a similar age to me. Like most of them are retiring, at least from the professional standpoint. Some are still going, and I find that inspiring. Like one person that I was just emailing with, and I am going to have a conversation with, is Sarah Hall. She and I are the same age. and she's not planning to retire anytime soon. She's still running at a high level. She said she has interest in, once her marathon days are, I wouldn't say done, but where she's not as competitive in the majors anymore. Like, she's going to move to trail and ultra running and kind of see how that goes. And there aren't many other 43-year-olds that were professionals and who were at the top of their game 15, 20 years ago that are still doing it. I find that like deeply inspiring. But there's less and less of that. And the flip side is I've paid less attention to, I couldn't tell you who a lot of the younger runners are in track and field and in road racing, in trail running, because I'm just not paying as close of attention to that. I'm trying to do a better job of it, because I do think, like, again, like, these stories are as old as time, but they're unique. And I want to get to know more and more of those stories so I can follow these athletes' careers for the next, 15, 20 years or so, or rivalries that are developing now that, hopefully we'll see, great battles. Like, I mean, I just think back to, I just saw you at the World Trail Championships in Confranc, and if I look at the top 10 of that race, I mean, it was loaded, yourself included. And I'm like, man, I mean, what an event to have all of these studs like competing against one another in a world championship. And hopefully that'll happen again in another couple of years, or you'll all do battle somewhere else, whether it's at Western States or CCC. And to me, like, it's not about like the course record or any of that stuff. It's like, oh, I'm just seeing these athletes going head to head in different environments at different points of their career. And you can see some of them are getting better. Some of them are maintaining, some of them are, are falling back. And to me, like, that's really, those storylines are interesting to follow and exciting. And I hope there's more of that, certainly in trail and ultra, but I'm interested in all aspects of running. So I'm looking for those. I'm looking for those rivalries on the road and on the track, because I think that's what makes it exciting as just a fan of the sport. That's something to follow. I mean, if they're one-off matchups every once in a while, that's not as exciting to me. Like, that's tougher to follow. People who are, going to duck someone else at a certain race or go somewhere else, where they know they can get an easy win or they can get a record versus, do the hard thing and go head to head with someone. I mean, that's been happening forever too, but I mean, I'm hopeful as a fan of the sport, like, there's just more of that happening too, in years to come. And that, that's exciting to me, cause I've definitely seen some of that now. So.
Yeah. And for sure, I feel the same, and I'm also pushing in that direction quite a lot.
Well, you're in it, yeah. You're right in the middle of it. So.
Yeah, exactly. And back to your point, I think it takes some time to build a character as an athlete. Like, for sure, I don't follow with the same enthusiasm some of the youngest runners as I have been following, Des Linden or some of the athletes that we consider the legends of the sport. Like, there's been especially in the US, I think, a generation of professional distance runners that has defined an era.
Yes.
To me, that was... Yeah, I can say it has changed and shaped my relationship with distance running for sure. And back when, the Bowerman or like some other training groups in the US were popular and successful, that was also part of the culture that I was interested in. And that had a profound impact on my own running and the way I approach the sport. And it's funny because we don't have, I mean, it's not true that we don't have any of that here in Europe or in Italy, but those stories are not as told here. So I've always looked, across the ocean to find those characters and stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's something we've done well here in the U.S., going back even to when I was getting my start in the sport, it's telling those stories. And even before that, I mean, there are, even before the internet was what it is today, there were always like magazines dedicated to like high school running, and then everything beyond that. So you could theoretically follow someone's career from the time that they were a teenager until they retired or won an Olympic medal or whatever it happens to be. Like those media outlets have always been here, just in different forms. And I mean, now they're almost a dime a dozen, and there's too many of them. You don't know who to follow, but they are. I mean, certainly here in the U.S., with high school running being as popular as it is, and now with social media being what it is, and a lot of these kids being able to, I mean, make, if you're really good, like make decent money as a teenager from telling your story and creating a fan base and a community. I mean, I'm curious to see like what direction that all goes in the next 20 years. Like, is that a net positive, or is it going to be a net negative because these kids put so much pressure on themselves now, to perform and like get a contract and all that stuff. But, regardless, like the coverage has always been there. So, if you are interested, like I was a high school runner myself, and I was always interested and I wasn't that good, but I was always interested in like, well, what are kids in other areas of the country doing for cross country?
What are
for
the
these,
best doing? Yeah.
yeah, for these standard distances on the track. Like, for me, again, when I was just really excited about all this stuff and getting into it, I'm like, how do they train? Because is it something I'm not doing like in my own training that I can't do that? Whatever it happens to be, and you do become like, for me, like I came up in this era of Dathan Ritzenhein, Ryan Hall, and Alan Webb. And I mean, Alan Webb was, these guys were just, they definitely defined a generation here in the US. I mean, they were three of the best high school runners of all time. Alan Webb broke the high school record. I remember watching him in the Prefontaine meet going against Hicham El Garouge and being like, this is wild. Like, this is so crazy. And watching Dathan Ritzenhein win a medal at the World Cross Country Championship. And, Ryan Hall, doing really great in high school, but then being the first American to break an hour for the half marathon, and just kind of watching their careers sort of evolve. And again, like that for me, a lot of that just kind of, it was huge, but it's also like, I've been a fan of those guys now for like 20 something years, and they've all like, of those three, like they've all retired, from the sport. But I love watching like Dathan as a coach, and knowing like kind of where he came from and his story, and maybe how that's influenced his own philosophy, as a coach. And like, so if it weren't for their stories being told, or them being as good as they were when they were teenagers,
It wasn't for flow track.
Exactly. Flow track, die stats. I still have on my bookshelf over here, like all these old magazines, like, Track and Field News, sports, like all these things, like, sharing their stories. Like I wouldn't have been fans of them, and I don't know that I would have stuck in the sport as long as I did. So I do think like we do a good job of that here, and something's working, because certainly on the younger level, if I look at just participatory numbers, track and field and cross country are huge here in the U.S. They're by far the most popular sports from a participatory standpoint, but we're doing, like, our athletes are doing really, really well. Like the depth at the high school level, from insane, the sprints all the way up to the distances is insane. I mean, we had a 16-year-old kid run 143 in the 800 this year.
Yeah.
And I do think like now it's like these kids follow each other on social media. They know about other performances right away. The information on how people train is just so easy to find, whereas it wasn't 20 years ago. And I do think like a lot of that has led to this kind of resurgence at certainly the high school level here, in the U.S. And I'm curious to see like how long of a tail that has, right? Like, what does that do for, Americans being competitive at the international level on the track, on the roads, on the trails for the next like 20 years? What does that do for the longevity of some of these athletes' careers?
Exactly.
And what does it do? And what does it do for the fan base of the sport? Can like you catch people at this stage and have them be lifelong fans because they've been following this kid for 20 years? So anyway, that was a long-winded rambling reply, but that's sort of where my head's at with a lot of this stuff right now.
Yeah, I love all of your reflections, and I wonder if we are actually building an environment that is both successful at making new champions, new athletes, and also ensuring a healthy approach to the sport to those young kids and for their future. I mean, I don't want people to stop running after high school or college and end up being sedentary just because they develop an unhealthy relationship with running or exercising. So that to me is important because it has big impacts on our society as a whole. So, I mean, on one hand, there is performance. Of course, I'm really happy if these kids are running extremely fast, and I hope they will have extremely long careers. On the other hand, I hope that, and to some extent, I think it's true. Like, if I think about 10 or 15 years ago, to me, the impression that I get is that the environment, the running space in general, is healthier than what it used to be on average. I don't know if you agree.
I don't know if I do either, but I don't
Like
know if I disagree.
we've
I mean,
managed
again, I
to
think
have some conversations on topics that were a taboo
yeah,
back 10 or 15 years ago, for example. And to me,
for
that's
sure.
awesome. That's a really good thing. There is more people in the sport. There is more money in the sport, which I think overall is a good thing. More opportunities for athletes. So there is a long list of positives for sure, and some
Yeah,
negatives. But I think the
yeah.
positives outweigh the negatives overall.
Yeah, you're probably right. I just think like both are always going to be there, right? But just like to focus on the positives. I mean, so for me, when I graduated from college in 2004, I was a pretty good college runner, and I wasn't good enough to go pro, but I thought, and my times back this up, if I could really dedicate myself to it for a few more years and break through, I might be able to get into a small training group or get a small contract and be able to really just focus on running at a fairly high level for a few years. And long story short, I did everything wrong, and I thought I had to look a certain way, and I suffered from disordered eating for a few years, and just trying to find, like, I felt so alone when I was going through that. I couldn't talk to anyone about it because there was a lot of shame, and especially if you were a male at the time. I mean, there's always been discussion around female runners and disordered eating, and a lot of progress has been made there too, but like almost none amongst males. And I would look on the internet, and I'd go to libraries just looking for, I'm like, is there research on this? If people shared their stories, almost nothing. And even in the research, like, men were not included in the research. It was mostly women and like female athlete triad stuff. And now, we have that's not no longer a thing. Now it's called Red S,
Yes.
relative energy deficient. Anyway, I'm jumbling it. But it's like inclusive of males and females and different, like, warning signs, and more men are coming out and talking about their experiences with this stuff. Like Jake Riley, who's an Olympic marathoner here in the US, has been very open about some of the stuff that he struggled with. And like, as someone who struggled himself, I mean, if I had seen that story when I was in my early 20s, I would have felt a lot less alone and been more apt
Oh,
to
for sure.
seek help sooner, type of thing. So I think there's been a ton of progress in areas like that. Being able to share training knowledge. One of the great things about the internet, Strava, for better or worse, like, if people are going to post their stuff on there, you can see exactly how someone trains week in and week out, if they're sharing much of their stuff. And even if not, they might be talking about it on podcasts. There's more coaches, on podcasts talking about their training philosophy, giving, speeches at, training conferences, that sort of thing. I mean, that stuff's always, sort of been there, but it was a lot harder to come by 15, 20 years ago. And now, like, that access to information is, it's widespread and it's almost immediate. And I think that's been a net positive, because people are always going to do stupid things, but people generally are training smarter, right? Like, because the information is there, and we know, how important all these different variables are, from volume and intensity, how to modulate intensity, the importance of recovery, nutrition. There's just been so much good information that's come out, and I think generally help people to stay in the sport longer, stay healthier, perform better, recover faster, all those sorts of things. So I think it's a net positive. On the flip side, especially with the younger crowd, I do think, and I get this quite a bit as a coach, like, I almost monthly have a parent, it's almost always a parent, reach out to me about private coaching for their kid. I don't do it. I did it maybe 6, 7 years ago, like 2018, 2019. And I stopped doing it because it made me like deeply uncomfortable, because it was often driven by the parent who wanted their kid to get a scholarship. And the kid might
Yeah,
have had some talent. They may have been willing to work hard, but they didn't want that. And them working privately with me, they're losing out on the benefits of like what it meant to be a high schooler, like being a part of like a team, and like training with other people. And, for me, like my best friends in life are the people that I've met through running. I mean, there's just like, you can't really replicate a relationship when you've suffered next to someone and like shared all these moments, good and bad,
totally.
for many, many years. And like, I do think like there are a lot of kids who are losing out on that because they're going the route of like private coaching, because they are chasing an NIL deal or a scholarship or, a pro contract type of thing. And to your point, there's a higher likelihood than not that those kids aren't going to be lifelong runners, or that the sport is going to be something they have a healthy relationship with, because they'll get burned out, and we've seen that, again, tale as old as time. We've seen that with, I mean, how many professional athletes do you know who just push themselves so hard their entire career? It was a job, but they didn't see it for anything beyond that. And as soon as their career was over, they stopped running, and all of a sudden were like, very unhealthy, and a lot of other things fell apart in their life. And so, I am worried about that, just because of the pressure that exists today, and some of the money that's in the sport. But on the flip side, there are more resources than there have been forever before. And like one of the things I try to write a lot about and talk about is like, look, I love to compete. I've been doing it my entire career as a runner. But at the same time, like, running has given me so many other benefits, and I'm glad that I haven't lost sight of that. And that's really what's kept me in it, more than, whatever silly goals I have as a 40-plus-year-old. It's more about like, oh, it makes me feel good. It helps me to manage my stress. It connects me with other people because I often share it. It's helped me to have all these different experiences, and I hope that doesn't get lost. And so I think it's like there's always going to be like that push and pull, right? And it's always going to be a little bit of both. But yeah, we'll see how it all kind of nets out over the next like 20 years or so. We'll see. There's more people running than ever before, so I mean
That's
you know
exciting. Yeah.
that's an exciting thing, and I think a net positive. But I hope we keep them running. Whatever it is they want to get out of it.
Yeah, I hope it's not just a bubble that will
Yeah.
burst, and yeah, it might be a cycle. We don't know, but hopefully not.
Well, I mean, these things always do cycle through, right? I mean, like, you know, there's no infinite hockey stick trajectory growth, type of thing. At some point, it will level off, and it may even like settle down, and then it may go up again. I mean, people have said, and I've talked about this with some folks, this is our third kind of running boom, and that's probably right, and at some point, like that boom or that bubble, will burst and things will settle. But then the baseline is like different
It's
than it
higher.
was
Yeah,
before, right? And at some
I don't.
point down the road, there's probably going to be another one, and that's just how these things go. And I think that's generally a healthy thing.
Yeah, and I don't think we should expect constant growth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not capitalism. I don't I don't like to see that same philosophy applied to everything and to running especially. Uh, so I mean, it will eventually reach a plateau, but then yeah, it's going to be a higher plateau than last time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a good thing. I would like to come back to the first few words of today's newsletter,
Yeah.
number 520. So 10 years of
10
the
years.
Morning Checkout
Mm-hmm.
newsletter. Because I think it's a really interesting point for any runner, from the beginner to the professional runner. Do you want to tell the story and maybe share some reflections?
Yeah. The short of it is that I coach in San Francisco every week, and more I see these bright hats, and on the bright hats it says in all capital letters, "Go one more." And I know what that's in reference to. There is a guy named Nick Bear who has a company called Bear Sports Nutrition. They make those hats, and the sentiment behind it is to push through things when they get hard. And as I wrote in the newsletter, like I generally agree with that sentiment. Like when things get hard, like there are moments when, yeah, you just have to keep going. Like you have to push, like you have to go that extra mile. But I chuckle every time I see that hat, because one thing I know for me as a coach, and this is going to be different, I think, depending on the level of runner and where someone's at in their journey, but the people who come to me for coaching are generally like pretty motivated people, right? They're paying me to work with them. They have some big goal that they want me to help them to get toward. They, for the most part, are generally coachable and will do what is on the training schedule. And they're like that in most other areas of their life as well. You know, a lot of these folks are very successful in their careers. They get things done. They're very like productive people, go-getters. They will literally and figuratively go the extra mile, sometimes to a fault, right? It's kind of got them very far in life, but I've also, because I get to know my athletes really well, I can see the downsides of it. And even beyond that, like that's me. Like I am wired that way, and I've seen that, you know, in myself. I think I've gotten where I am, you know, as an athlete, as a coach and a content creator, like as a person, because I am able to push when things get hard. But I've also seen the flip side of that. It's also affected me in not so great ways. Like I have literally broken myself as a runner from pushing myself, from going one more, you know, too often. And I see that with some athletes that I coach. I mean, I've certainly compromised relationships by just being a bit too much, like in those relationships.
Do you think it's like to have this somewhat unhealthy relationship with running or any other task? Do you think it's a requirement in order to be successful at that task? It's a question that I've wondered so many times. Like,
Yeah.
am I successful because
I wonder the same thing, Francesco. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it might be part of it. But again, like I chuckle.
Because I would like the answer to be no,
Yeah.
but I'm not entirely sure. Like,
Yeah.
deep down within myself, there is something telling me that some people are good, or like really, really good, or I'm good at something because at some point I was obsessed with that thing up to a point where it became unhealthy.
Yeah.
And maybe not respectful of other people, not respectful of the person I am.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you can ever know where that line is, whatever it is, whether it's running, relationships, some other aspect of life, until you go over it, right? That's when you know the line is there. And I've gone over that line a few times. So like at this point of my life, like I have a pretty good idea of where that is for my running, for my relationships, for my career, for other aspects of my life. And like what that's taught me is when I get there, it's like, that's when it's time to stop pushing. Then that's where I got to pull back. And that was the whole kind of premise of my newsletter this morning, is most people who have that personality trait, a lot of the people probably listening to this podcast, we would benefit from learning to go one less. Like you don't always have to go one more. So like for me as a coach, like I see this all the time. And I didn't write this in the newsletter, but it's a good example. When I write training for my athletes, because I'm not, for the most part, like most of the athletes I coach live somewhere other than me. So I'm not with them at their workouts. I always give a range of intervals, or if we do a tempo run, like how long it's going to be. Because you just don't know like how things are going to go, like on a given day. And I always tell people, I'm like, I want you to finish most of these workouts feeling like if you needed to, you could do another rep or two, but don't do it. Right. And so it's always interesting when I'm analyzing training, I might give someone, say, 8 to 10 by 3-minute reps with a 2-minute recovery. And I am always like, even before I look at the data or I see what comments they've left me, if I see that they've only done like 8, I do like a little cheer. I'm like, good for them. Like they didn't feel the need to push to 10. I have other athletes, and I've had athletes like this for years, where they'll do 12. And I'm just like, what the hell are you doing? And what I've seen, because I've been doing this for a long time, is the folks who learn when to push and when to pull back are the ones who give me the most consistent results. They train the most consistently, they stay healthy, and it's kind of a sustainable thing. The ones who are more prone to just always like do 12 when 10 is the cap. Or, I say, hey, let's try to keep this tempo run around 6 minutes per mile. And they're like, I went 550s, type thing. Like some days you're going to feel good and like you're going to do that, but you don't need to beat the workout every time. So the people who are constantly trying to beat the workout, they tend to have more ups and downs in their training. They tend to be injured a bit more often, and their results, aren't as consistent. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I can say with certainty with my own like personal research study, like I know that to be, I know that to be true. So, yep. That was kind of the takeaway from the opening of my newsletter this morning is like, for most people, it's like, yes, you have to push to become great at whatever it is, like to be a great business person, to be a great runner, to be a great partner. But if you're always doing that, you're going to cross that line and like, keep pushing yourself over the edge. So you need to learn, again, through trial and error, through screwing it up, like, how to pull back. And I do think because of social media and the in-your-face nature of it, and sensationalism is what's going to get the clicks. Like, there's just a lot of like push, like always go one more, like literally and figuratively go the extra mile. And it's like, well, there's a time and a place to do that, and like that's required. But the people who are great at what they do, the really great athletes, the great business people, the great partners, like they also know when to pull back, right? So that was kind of the major gist of what I wrote in this morning's newsletter.
Yeah, and I think it's a very universal lesson, and it applies really well to any runner. And yeah, thanks for that, because it's a really, really, really good read.
Yeah. Well, we all need the reminders too. I mean, I still have to remind myself of this all the time. Like I want to get greedy. Like I have my insecurities. There are times when I don't think that I've done enough. And that's often when we try to push a little bit more. And that's where you just really have to
prove yourself.
Yeah. You want to prove it. Exactly. And like freaking Strava, like that was literally their tagline for a long time. Prove it, type of thing. Yeah. And I'm like, I've got more comfortable being like, I don't need to prove anything to anybody. Like, I know I've been putting in this work for the last like 10 years, and I know that this last rep is not going to make a difference versus, whether I do like 12 reps or 10 today isn't going to make a difference, in my next race result. But by doing 10 and like feeling good when I step away from that workout, I'm going to be able to come back and do it again tomorrow and next week and the week after that, versus we've all done it where we've done that last rep, or we've gone like an extra mile, or we've gone a little faster than we need to. And then for one reason or another, we've regretted it afterwards. Sometimes you can get away with it. I can tell you as you get older, like you get away with it a lot less. And so you need to be really, really careful about like when you do that. But I mean, again, doesn't come naturally to me, probably doesn't come naturally to most people listening to this, but that's really the practice and the discipline and the thing that you really have to keep working at.
Yes, because we are ambitious, and
yeah.
I think we also we are in a culture that romanticizes hard work. So
yes,
putting in hard work is socially seen as a sign of like it's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
People will love you because of that, and it's a way to seek appreciation. So
yeah. Well, to tie it back to content, I mean, with social media being something that's constant, and whether you're a professional athlete, a professional content creator, or just someone who posts to Instagram or Strava all the time, like there is a performative nature to it, right? You're like, oh, I want to show everyone that I'm working hard, right? So, you have the workout that looks impressive on Strava, or, you can tell your followers on Instagram, like, yeah, I just crushed myself with, a workout. But the opposite's not true. No one brags when they go one less interval. No one brags when they're like, yeah, I took the day off today because I was just tired.
We should be doing that.
We should be. But that's what I was saying in the newsletter. I'm like, I should make a hat and
celebrate recovery.
Yeah, I mean, a few people have written me. They're like, oh, that hat actually does exist, which in retrospect, I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me. But it's like, yeah, it's not going to sell.
The go one less hat.
Yeah. So, anyway, sorry to cut you off there.
That's cool.
I get fired up about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Cool. I mean, to wrap up this conversation, you mentioned that you read my post from yesterday where I was talking about the tension between performance and content applied to regarding professional athletes
Yeah.
mostly. And that conversation actually originated from a podcast by Single Track, Phil Melanson, who was talking to Kelly Newland, who is an athlete manager for many trail and ultra runners. And Finn was like starting from an idea where in 2025 we've got to a point where content matters more than performance for professional athletes. And Kelly was trying to, change his mind, and she actually had some great points, and she was able to, probably deconstruct that idea, that preconcept, which obviously as an athlete I didn't agree with, it sparked a few thoughts and reflections that I felt like writing down. I don't know, what's your impression, and did you have any reaction to my words?
Yeah, I'm aligned with you. I think I coach a number of professional athletes and have for years, and I don't look at all of their contracts, but on occasion, like we'll talk about that. And I mean, to a person, almost all the professional athletes that I've worked with, performance is what matters. I mean, in some of those contracts, there are requirements. Oh, you got to make, a couple appearances a year at
Yes,
brand events, or we need you for a photo shoot for this, that, and the other. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, you are a sports marketing representative for that brand, and that's again like that's another tale.
But those are like real life events. It's not like
real life events, which I think are much more valuable, even
content.
if they're even if
Exactly.
they're smaller in number. But all of them have their contracts because of performance that they've put up. It had nothing to do with how many Instagram followers they had, or how many magazine covers they've been on. And I mean, I have seen contracts where athletes
But
do
actually,
get
like,
bonuses.
if you really think about
Yeah,
why are you on a magazine cover? Because you want to race. Guess
because
what?
exactly.
So
Yeah,
the primary reason why you get visibility is because of performance, not because
it's a byproduct of performance, right?
Exactly.
And I've seen contracts. I mean, generally, a lot of athlete contracts are you have a base, and then you have performance incentives, and oftentimes they're tiered: tier A, tier B, tier C. Worth X amount of money, and an athlete will oftentimes structure their season around those because there are literally higher value races that are there. But if you win a big race, chances are everyone's going to want to talk to you. More people are going to want to know who you are. So your Instagram following is probably going to grow anyway.
Exactly.
You're going to have more of these opportunities, and then it's on the athlete to decide, like, okay, well, what makes sense for me to do? Because I can't do all of it, or then I'm losing focus as what I need to do as an athlete. But it's all performance, right? And if they don't get re-signed as a contract, it's because they didn't perform, right? It doesn't really have much to do with their Instagram following. And I think that was a point that you really tried to get across in your post. I was like nodding my head as I was reading it. I was like, yeah, more people need to know this, because I do think, again, like, people check social media multiple times a day, and you would think like some of it is based on following, but I think social media is an illusion in a lot of ways. I mean, there are people who aren't, I mean, no disrespect anyway, who aren't putting up great performances and have a lot of followers on, on social media, but it's probably not as rosy for them as as you would think. They can make something look good, or they try to be relevant in other ways. But I mean, for a professional athlete, it is about performance. It is about consistently putting up good results. And if you can do that, you're going to have a good long career. Like, you will find a way to have a good long career, and treat people well, and like be an upstanding, person, and be available like when necessary. But
course.
if you don't perform, like, it's going to be hard to be able to do it at a professional level. And I just think it's good that's gotten across, or starting to get across a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. I actually wrote somewhere along the way we built this misconception that what we do online matters
Yeah.
more than what we do on the trails. But if you actually weigh the facts, that's simply not how it works. So I think
No.
it's this kind of summarizes our discussion. And yeah, of course, like communication is still important. It's how you connect with people, the impression you leave, the values you stand for. And that's also important for a brand. But the primary reason why a pro athlete is sponsored is because of his performance.
Yeah.
Then we can discuss about the separation or overlap between an athlete and an influencer. But I think those are two separate categories.
Yeah.
And it's better to keep them separate, because otherwise there is a lot of confusion, and I don't know. I just think it's not healthy for the sport.
Yeah, I agree. I think there needs to be a much clearer separation. And for the most part, I think there generally is, but there is a bit of a Venn diagram where there is some like overlap, where you have someone who's like pretty decent athlete, but they're also like a pretty good like content
Pretty
creator.
good
And
at
again,
selling themselves and
yeah, and I don't know
content.
I don't know the specifics of their deal, but it could be structured as such. I mean, some people are better at negotiating than others and getting what they
That's
want.
fine.
Like, well,
Yeah.
well, and that's fine. We'll never know the details of that because of NDAs, and it's like whether you like that or not is too bad. But I mean, there's some of that. But I think like for the majority, it's like, yeah, if you want to be a professional athlete, you better be really fucking good at what you do. And you better be good at it for consistently for a long time. If you can do that, like you're gonna have a pretty good career. And if not, like, you might have to reevaluate some things. And the last thing I'll say on this, like as a coach of professional athletes who is involved in some of these conversations, oftentimes, and it's not in their contract, but the social media side of things, the media side of things, the online world in general becomes a bit of a distraction, and that's a
Oh yeah.
conversation I have with many athletes, because I'm like, look, we got to focus on getting you ready for this race on this date. Like you gotta perform there. And I've had that conversation with athletes like in contract years, where we know it's like, hey, you're gonna be having a conversation in a few months, and what they're going to look at is how well did you perform this year, and that's really what it's going to come down to, and that's fairly black and white for the most part. And it's really just trying to get them to stay focused on that and not being distracted by what people are saying on social media, on a message board, or online, because all that stuff's there, but it's noise. I mean, a lot of that is noise, and I do think there are some professional athletes who know this stuff, but like they still get distracted by it, and that ends up affecting their performance, which is again the main thing that's going to allow them to be and stay a professional athlete. So yeah, it's tricky.
Good point.
But, yeah.
Who are the pro athletes that you coach? Can you share the names?
Yeah, so you just competed with him at World Trail Championships, Vincent Bouillard, who is he's in an interesting situation because he is a pro athlete with Hoka now, but he still does a little bit of work for them. And I don't know the specifics of that breakdown, but it's like, yeah, he has an athlete contract, which is based on performance, and he has another contract that's based on like him being a part of their footwear innovation team, which is fairly unique. I've worked with Tim Tollefson for over 10 years now, from the start of his ultra running career, and he's definitely entering a new phase with that right now. But he's competed at a high level for 10 years and represented a few different brands. Along the way, I work with Mario Mendoza, who is a Brooks athlete. He's in his last year of being a professional athlete. He just finished 5th at the Kodiak 100 mile, which would be his last 100 mile as a professional. We might try to squeeze one more race in before the end of the year, and then he's going to focus more on being a pastor and a coach next year. I have, let's see, that might be it for professional athletes at this point.
Do you have anyone in marathon and track?
No one who's professional athlete, like making a career out of it, but I have a number of like Olympic trials level marathoners here in the US, all of whom have a different profession as their career, where they're working to like make a living, and may or may not have a small deal with a brand, but certainly nothing that they're living off of, which
But still running at a very good level.
Yeah, for most of those athletes, that tends to be the situation with them. And then Patty O'Leary, he's a North Face athlete, also just ran at the Trail World Championships based here in San Francisco. I mean, he's a professional athlete with North Face, has had a contract with them for several years, but he works full time. He works in the sciences, and he's always had kind of, and I feel like a lot of professional trail athletes like are balancing a few different things. Like they may be able to be a full-time athlete, but maybe they do a little coaching on the side, or they have a part-time job because they need it, or they just want something to take their mind off running, which I think is which is a healthy thing. So there's that as well. But yeah, that's my short list of professional / elites.
Thanks. I don't want to take too much of your time, so thanks a lot for today's conversation, and I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I'm a big fan of you as an athlete, and as a writer and a content creator. I have a lot of respect for you in both of those regards. But I respect that you're not afraid to use your voice and speak up about topics in the sport that are directly relevant to you, whether it is doping and trail running, whether it is the professional side of the sport. And I mean, not everyone is good at that or wants to, have those conversations. It's not required of you to do so. But I think it's really helpful, certainly for fans and people who are trying to, understand the sport, and also to, as crazy as it sounds, understand like you're not just a robot who runs 160K a week and, races 6 to 10 times a year. Like you're a human being with thoughts, and these things do affect you. And I think, you've done a great job of just, kind of riding that line. So hats off to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. I think one of my goals I have for the sport in general is to help build a better environment than what I found when I started running, when I started being a professional athlete. So I think it's important to have some uncomfortable conversations sometimes, and to bring up topics that aren't easy. But yeah, of course, it's hard to deal with issues and problems, but it's exactly those things that we need to take care of, not things that are going well and that make us happy. So yeah, I mean, it's not my mission. I don't feel any pressure to do that. No one is making me, talk about doping or athletes' contracts or other issues, but it's something that I deeply want to do when I feel I have some good arguments and topics.
Well, just so you know, it's appreciated. And as someone who's been creating content in this space for a long time, you often don't hear back from people. I mean, sometimes when you really like press a sensitive button, like you will definitely hear back from people. So it lets you know folks are paying attention. But oftentimes it can feel like you're just shouting out into the void. But know that it's appreciated, and I know that I speak for other people when I share that.
Thank you. And I hope to connect again very soon.
Yeah, let's definitely stay in touch, and thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Mario.